Here's lesson number 1 in the pigeon game. Never let what a man does in his work week let you assume what he can do to you on the weekend. It's as true today as it was a century ago. The common man can be a king in the pigeon racing sport. In Northern Ireland, Paul Gregg and his brother Stephen work for the city. Monday to Friday, young Paul is cleaning the sidewalks of Belfast. On Saturdays, he's often cleaning up in the incredible competition of the NIPA, the Northern Ireland Pigeon Association. Paul's simple vocation is like many of the fanciers you'll meet here. Our racing champions include an English butcher and stonecutter, a Belgian roofer and slipper maker, and an Irish concrete worker and Dutch school teacher. They may not be captains of industry, but they are certainly commanders of the sky. First of all, I decided to include 2 of England's legends. 20 years ago, Jeff Kirkland and Frank Tasker were called the best of British. This was the name of an instructional video featuring these 2 British fanciers. It was one of the first, if not the first tape of its kind on the market, and opened the eyes of many trainers worldwide as to the key elements of widowhood and advanced methods of training and conditioning. It was seeing this movie that first led me to Frank Tasker, and he was subsequently featured in Marathon in the Sky. What's important to realize about this retired butcher from the Midlands of the UK was that 20 years ago, he was one of the deadliest middle distance flyers in English racing history. Over the following 2 decades, when he moved to Northeast England and into the path of even heavier competition, he's remained at the top of his old bird game, but has also scored possibly the strongest young bird results ever seen in the kingdom. He has often won the first through 5, 6, or 7 places in the Peterborough Federation, up against 5,000 or more young birds, proving his conditioning and motivational skills to be at the top of the game. And in addition to breeding his own winners, he has put together pairings for his numerous friends that have won more than a few national races. I've always liked Frank for his clear thinking, his ability to explain complicated aspects of the sport in simple terms, and for the fact that he's one of the most generous men I know in pigeon racing, in terms of sharing his ideas, his birds, and his time with the many, many fanciers he calls friends. In fact, if he was less generous, he'd probably be an even greater champion. But the simple fact is that on any given weekend, Tasker sometimes takes a back seat to one of his many disciples who outdo him with the birds and methods he has passed on. If the happy-go-lucky Tasker had an alter ego, it would have to be the relatively silent but deadly Jeff Kirkland. A retired stonecutter, Jeff is arguably England's greatest living long-distance flyer, a position he's maintained for many years. When he appeared in Best of British, he was already many times a national winner, and season after season he has held a position as one of the kingdom's most dangerous men. That Kirkland has stayed at the top of his game is even more impressive when you realize he's had several major upsets in that period, including the tragic loss of his wife of many years, relocating to a new home, and building a new family of birds. So respected is Jeff in the UK that England's Racing Pigeon magazine convinced him to write a book detailing his methods and the stories of his early days in the pigeon game. It's now a bestseller, and has helped a lot of fanciers understand the good humor and gentleness of a champion who normally avoids the limelight. Now remarried to his wife Barbara and living in the rolling countryside in north-central England, Kirkland has continued to dominate national flying, aided by one of the joys of his retirement, his granddaughter, who calls herself his loft manager. On the other side of the English Channel, you'll hear from another writer, but he doesn't use his pen to let folks in on his quiet side. Former school teacher Odd Sherlockens is one of Holland's greatest living racing pigeon fanciers. But he does more than let his winning speak for itself. Over the last decade, Sherlockens has become one of the world's most respected writers in the pigeon hobby, in large part because he matches his broad knowledge and writing skills with a streak of brutal honesty that fanciers throughout the world find stimulating and refreshing. His extensive work on the history of the Jansen family and their famous pigeons has been translated into 7 languages, and he is today the person whose work appears in more pigeon publications than anyone else on earth. Maybe it's because I'm a writer myself that I gravitate to these men who race and write, but it was Frank Tasker who first led me to Paul Halterman. Now in his 80s, the professor, as he's often called in Belgium, limits his pigeon activities to a few pairs of breeders and spending time with his many disciples near where he lives in the central part of the country. In the 1970s and 80s, Halterman was both a champion trainer and a well-known writer who provided the weekly race reports of the biggest national winners for Belgium's largest pigeon publication. From the heart of pigeon racing in Belgium, we're also going to visit the European country I've always felt has never gotten the recognition it deserves. That country is Ireland, and particularly the incredible competition in and around Belfast. Not only is the competition fierce, with national races regularly topping 30,000 birds on the wing, but the long-distance birds fly one of the world's toughest courses. From release points in France, race birds must first cross the English Channel and then face the daunting Irish Sea. It's a course so challenging that only 7 birds in history have ever won the gold medal for being clocked in the money from 4 races from France. In spite of the many years of troubles in the north that the world heard so much about, pigeon racing never stopped, and many clubs then and now are a mix of both Catholic and Protestant flyers, proving that racing the bird of peace is for many people far more important than religion or politics. Now, when you say someone is a dangerous man in Northern Ireland, you could easily start thinking of a very tough customer. But the most dangerous man in the Irish pigeon sport is a quiet concrete worker named Ronnie Williamson. Each day in the work week, Ronnie pours and carries 5 to 7 tons of concrete pipe, a job he's had for almost 30 years. On the weekend, it's fair to say Ronnie is one of, if not, the greatest pigeon racing man alive. The NIPA is one of the largest pigeon organizations in the UK. In the last 15 years, Williamson has won First Open almost 50 times, against competition numbering as many as 30,000 pigeons. In one race, he took the first 8 positions against some 25,000 entries. He's been the North's Fancier of the Year 10 times. If anything, his performances have gotten stronger in the last few years. His Millennium Superstar, now retired to the breeding loft, not only won 3 open races against over 22,000 birds each time, a feat never before achieved in Ireland, he did it 3 weeks in a row. Like Jeff Kirkland, Ronnie Williamson is not one for the spotlight. He seldom, if ever, gives interviews, and his phenomenal career has not been without heartbreak. In 1995, his name was in the major news media when a jealous rival broke into his loft and killed many of his finest birds. Ronnie rebuilt his team and never looked back, although security is now part of his management plan today. And finally, both in Belfast and in Belgium, I decided to spend time with fanciers I will call disciples of some of the champions you'll meet here. It helps to show that the basic methods these great trainers are talking about can be learned by others. This is particularly true for the 2 Belfast brothers we mentioned earlier, Paul and Stephen Gregg, who fly under the name Gregg Brothers McCandless to honor their now-deceased grandfather who started them in the sport. In their drive to get to the top of the results sheet, the Gregg brothers sought out and befriended both Ronnie Williamson and Frank Tasker to find out what they were doing wrong. Today, in their backyard in Belfast, just a block from the city's infamous Falls Road, the Gregg brothers have earned their place as the hottest young flyers in town, a position they readily recognize is due to their paying attention to 2 fine pigeon men who were kind enough to share their methods. The Gregg's young bird methods have yielded particularly strong results. In 2003, their bird Ulster's Bang On turned in a racing performance that earned it the award as the best young bird in the entire United Kingdom. And over in Belgium, even though the professor has retired from racing his own birds, Paul Halterman's influence is still felt each week on the result sheets. His most avid disciple is probably Elaine van den Driesche, a roofing contractor who lives near Paul and flies in partnership with his son Dirk and wife Christine. Later, you'll hear more from Dirk, for the simple reason that neither of his parents speak much English. Elaine is a serious pigeon man and erected his loft before he built his new home. Obviously, it helps to have a family that's willing to live in the bottom of a pigeon loft while their house is being built. And this Belgian trio have been well known for their race performances since Dirk was a little boy. They scored a first national win from Limoges, and week after week at the middle and long distance they are fierce competitors. One of their widowhood cocks was ranked 3rd best in all of Belgium in 2005, and their dining room is crowded with the trophies of past victories. And their backyard is now where Paul Halterman can usually be found on race day. Halterman's observations and advice have been critical to Elaine's success, and each November, the professor is called in to grade the family's birds, using methods you'll learn here later, and to select the breeders for the coming year. So there you have our cast of characters, champions from England, Ireland, Holland, and Belgium, who've been at the top of the game for many years. Each races in different competition, at different distances, and over widely different terrain. But what you'll soon realize in the chapters ahead is that they share many common thoughts and observations, information that will help you too become much more competitive on race day, no matter where you live in the world.